Can you remember the first thing you did that you felt was politically involved or politically engaged?
I was always active in student government in high school, so I always held an office in, student government, class government, or whatever. But I went to Radford when it was an all-girls college.
Okay.
And so I was part of the group that lobbied to succeed, to be able to get the doors to our rooms open on Sunday afternoons from 1 to 4 so that men could come in the dorm in our room as long as we had the doors open.
So you got involved in a political issue that directly affected you.
This was during the
and your
Vietnam
community.
War, though. I mean, it's pretty lame.
Well, no, it's not lame. No, it's a great example because it shows that you were trying to make it a better community.
Yeah.
You got involved. You lobbied, and is the result? It worked.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, eventually it got co-ed, became a party school and everything, which is way after my time.
Yeah. But also, I'm in awe of you because I ran back in high school and college, would run for student government, never got elected. So I never had a position in student government in school, but I'm in awe of that you're the successful politician.
Well, yeah, but generally speaking, I like to be behind the scenes.
Okay. So you've been very engaged in Manassas and in this area for several years now. Mm-hmm. What motivated you to become very active in politics, behind the scenes?
Trump getting on the stage of the national government.
Coming down the escalator and
I knew that I couldn't just not do something.
Right.
I mean, just like a lot of people, like, what can we do? And I had some friends that were in this committee, our local Manassas Park committee. And one of our friends was that we knew through church was the co-chair, and so it's like, okay. So I went to a first meeting, and there's probably maybe 25 people or something like that, and that was the point in which that committee started to grow.
Right.
Because up until then, I've been told that the group was small enough that they could always meet in somebody's living room.
Right.
And now we have 75 plus members, and clearly we cannot fit in the living room because we usually have 50 people attending our meetings, and we do hybrids. So, most of the people are there in person, but we have a few people that it just is more logical for them to, we did Zoom through COVID, and so we got used to that. People knew how to do it and everything like that. So, yeah.
And what sort of activities have you been engaged with? What sort of things is the community?
Well, okay, one of the first reasons why I got really involved was I went to a city council meeting and I heard that they were trying to make a decision about whether to fund the VRE train station more or the OmniLink, which is our local bus service. And one of the councilmen said something about how, well, if it was up to him, he would, cut back on the bus service. And that just lit my fire because I had been a social worker at that point, and I knew how many people relied on the bus, couldn't drive to do their laundry or their groceries, had little kids. I mean, it was important to me that somebody speak up for the people that relied on the bus. And so I was told, well, if this is an important issue to you, why don't you write a resolution and propose it to us? Well, I'd never written a resolution before, so I'm like, whereas, all right, I'm looking at samples online. I said, I can do this. So I wrote a resolution and I took it to the leadership committee meeting, and they said, yeah, this is fine. I think they might have tweaked one bullet or something like that, but we took it to the committee and they voted on it. And in that process, I had actually gone to a couple ESL classes to try to talk to the people there and ask them, tell me some reasons why you think we should keep the bus system.
Right.
So it's not just from my own perspective. And then I went and I gave a little speech at the city council meeting about it. And
were you limited to 3 minutes? Is that
the
standard? Yeah, the 3-minute limit.
Yeah. And I, basically said, I don't know how many of you have ever been in a situation where you only had one car in your family for some reason. And you know how irritating and aggravating that was? Well, think about if you didn't have any car and you had to do these things. So anyway, so that was the first time I spoke at city council meeting. Although I had spoken before, you asked if I had been publicly active. When I was working with Northern Virginia Family Service with the prevention social work program, every year I would go to Prince William County school, the supervisors meeting and advocate for funds.
Right.
So I had done some of that stuff before, and I did it, probably maybe 3 or 4 times before that. So I'd done that kind of stuff.
And I always admire social workers because whether it doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of advocating directly to a city council, but I feel like it's one of those professions where advocacy is really part of it. You're not just providing a service. I think you're trying to create something better in a better community.
But you're also trying to, you're trying to educate people.
So that's all very local. But then the last few years with Trump either being out of office or back in office, you've had to engage in a lot more national topics.
Right. Well, so in my role as a co-chair, and I do want to say I am a co-chair.
Yes.
And my co-worker, co-chair, Cheryl Macias, she was co-chair before me. And she was actually a student of mine. My first year to teach in Fairfax County, my only year to teach in Fairfax County, and she remembered me. Now,
Did you eventually remember her?
Well, okay. We were both working for this committee.
Right.
We were both at a gun prevention rally that was in Manassas, so probably 2016-ish.
Yeah.
And we were, we had clipboards so we could register people to vote. And we were kind of walking around, we were talking, and she said to me, you have looked so familiar to me ever since I saw you here.
Right.
And I said, so then we sort of started talking about where she grew up, where she went to school, and vice versa, and all this. And she finally figured out that I was her teacher when she was a freshman in high school. Now, she has changed a lot, and that was 40 years, 50 years later or whatever. 14-year-olds don't look like themselves.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So anyway, so that was a real bond for us.
Oh, yeah.
And so from that, I think she recommended that I be our outreach chair. And so I did that for, 3 years maybe or something. And outreach is, just, welcoming more people to our committee, promoting it, sending them emails if they sign up for our email distribution list, welcoming them and getting people to sign up for our newsletter and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that was a good entree to the governance aspect of the committee because I didn't know anything about that. And up until then, I was not as aware of all the local political stuff that was going on. I was aware of national stuff because it's in the news all the time. But as far as what was going on in city councils or school board issues or whatever, I was not that.
And Manassas is probably like most places in the country, we've had a decline in local journalism.
Oh yeah.
Over the years.
Yeah,
and
we
so
used to have we used to have the Journal Messenger, and we don't have as many.
Right, and it seemed like every town had at least one person who was pretty much covering every city council meeting, everything, and reporting on it, and made it easy to follow. But that's sadly in America gone for most people.
It seems like it's been a real whirlwind. I mean, we've been. This is my second one of these notebooks, and every time we have to deal with anything, I'm like writing it down just because sometimes when I have nothing else to do, I'll go back and highlight. Oh yeah, remember that? Okay.
Now, not to get ahead of ourselves, but the Smithsonian might want that notebook.
Oh, you think?
Because, and I say that somewhat facetiously, but I also think a lot of what people that are involved in politics have been through in the last 8 years, and not just Trump, also the pandemic. I don't think a lot of people are taking notes because we've been too busy.
Right.
And I don't think people take notes as much as they used to. But I do think a lot of it would be very interesting to see what people were thinking and how they reacted, and so.
Yeah. Well, I had to get up to speed. She was already up to speed because she'd been doing it for 2 years.
Right.
And it's not, just like when you're driving someplace, or at least for me, when I'm in the passenger seat, I'm not paying attention as well as I would be if I was driving.
Oh, of course not.
So, there was issues that had been raised, and because I was co-chair, I had been attending the leadership meetings for, I'm going to say 3 years, just guess roughly. And so I heard about all these things, but if it was not like within my outreach domain and stuff,
Right.
some of it percolated in, but not all of it. So, she was really good because she had worked on the Hill, and she's much better at strategizing and that kind of stuff. I'm more like policies and procedures and calendars of events and scheduling and pacing ourselves and, what we need to do for the next agenda and how to, all that kind of stuff. So one of the things I thought was important was for our agendas, like to have some times. Like, we're going to start this at 7, and we better be at this point by 7:25, because if we're not going to ever get through any of these other things. So I was kind of, detail-oriented about some of that kind of stuff. Because our people can talk.
I've been on many committees. I've chaired a bunch of committees, and that's always been one of my biggest weaknesses. I should have had you on a committee because I've always let things go on too long. Because people are talking.
Oh, they do.
You let them talk. And so.
They do. So, I had to get up to speed about all the different, all the election laws, the deadlines, when you file, what's required to file, what the schedule is. Every year there's an election. So what are we doing this year? How many slots do we need to fill? Who wants to run again? Who doesn't? All of those details, because between our two cities, we have a mayor of both Manassas and Manassas Park, and we have 3 council members. So every 3 years, there's those up there running again. Right. And so we have to help support all that process.
Do you find, as a co-chair or as outreach, but anyone involved with the local parties, communication to the community is a huge challenge? Because I think it's different now, different generations, and even different people within the same generation. There's so many different ways that they communicate and keep in touch now. It's hard to, I'm old enough to remember when, if you wanted to do outreach or something, you probably just needed a mimeograph machine.
Oh,
and you would
what about a ditto machine?
And you would just run it off, and you just hand it out, and that's how you got news out. Because unless you're going to make a lot of phone calls, that was about the only way. So is that your challenge? Is communication a huge challenge? Have you solved it?
So when I started out with outreach, one of the things we did was had a postcard that we sent out to all newly registered voters in the cities. And we would get that list from the registrars and all.
Public information.
And, there was a cost to that. Now, a bunch of people didn't like that idea because they thought, well, why spend that money? What percentage of the people are ever even going to see that? Well, one of our members, when at a subsequent meeting, and I said, we spent $200 on this project or whatever. Like, well, why are we spending that? Well, one of the people raised his hand and he said, I got one of those postcards, and that's why I am active in this committee. And he later ran and was successfully proved to be the councilman in Manassas Park.
All right.
So that one person, to me, justified
cover the cost.
that.
Yeah. He's given that much worth to the community.
Right. And then we also sent letters to all the people who purchased a house in Manassas. We did that 2 or 3 years. But those things cost money.
Right.
So we have sort of moved away from some of that, and we focus on we have a weekly roundup email that goes out. It's we don't send the emails all the time because that just irritates me and a bunch of other people I know. So we don't ask for money in those emails either. We send out a weekly roundup that has all the local events that are happening politically in Manassas, Manassas Park, or the adjoining areas of Prince William, because
Right. But not all of Prince William.
no, I mean, because it's too much.
It's huge.
It's too much. But, you know, the adjoining areas we, you know, try to include. And we keep a website, and
Right.
we have really good people on our communications and technology committee, and they maintain that. We have some people that are active on Facebook. We have not yet really gotten into Instagram. We started a Blue Sky account. We still have some people doing
All right.
X, you know, but not too much of that.
Right.
But how to get the word out? So, like, it seems like we now have 590-ish people getting our weekly roundup.
Okay. And that's an email.
It's a weekly email, and
Right.
it then has links to, you know, if you want
Sure.
to RSVP, whatever, that kind of thing. And we seem to be getting more people gradually doing that. And then by dovetailing with Indivisible Nova West and Mobilize and all those sorts of things, word is getting out more. When we do our so when people apply to vote absentee, this is another example of how communication has changed. We used to send a letter, and there would be a letter with a sample ballot, because every year we do it after the primaries, and we know who our nominees are. We create a sample ballot, Democratic sample ballot, for both cities, and we used to send that copy of that, a copy of like a little profile of each of our candidates, and a general little letter. I guess that was all together. And that costs money, you know, to do that.
Right. And time of someone to put it together.
Stuff in envelopes. So some people really like to do that. They like to sit around and do that, just like a lot of people like to sit around and do postcards. And there's still uses for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But now we have moved into text, text banking kind of thing. And so, you know, we find out once again, because it's public information, who's applied for a sample ballot. And if they're Democrat or lean Democrat or independent, we send them a text message if they have a verifiable cell phone.
Right.
So that doesn't cost us anything to do that. And again, you need volunteers who are willing to cut and paste and be a part of that. But so some of our processes have had to, you know, morph as communication has changed. And then we do send articles to the newspaper.
Yeah.
You know, we send calls for candidates, and we have this big fundraiser that we had in April. We send things like that out to the newspaper, although a lot of places don't publish it, but we still send it.
Do you have precinct captains?
We do. That is an
Okay.
area that we're still trying to build up. We have some that are really active and some that are, I mean, like in Manassas, we have, 6, and in Manassas Park, we have 3. We don't, that's an area we'd still like to beef up a little bit more.
Because even if you get a lot of the texting and the social media, and you do that well, behind it all, you do want to have an in-person kind of structure where, the committee knows people who then know people, and you have a sense that it connects throughout the community that way.
Yeah, ideally, when I hear these other people say that they had a precinct captain in their neighborhood and they had a party and they invited all their neighbors, like, we don't have that. That's something we would like to
Next year.
work towards. Yeah, we have some goals like that, yes. And, our committee used to, so I think this is a great thing. Our committee used to have mainly older people, retired people.
Yes.
And, I'm one of them, so I get that. But then we started getting some people that were in their 40s. And we're like, oh, hallelujah. They know how to do things that we don't know how to do. I'd never used a QR code. I mean, I'd seen them a couple times.
Right.
And they said, oh, you have to have a QR code and everything now. And we're like, okay. So can you do it? Can you set it up? And now we're more fluent in QR codes. But
Right.
it's just...
Have you got some people in their 20s? I mean, the 40s is a good step forward.
We have
Anyway, in your 20s.
some people in their 30s.
Okay, so you're getting there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to me, it was pretty, and people that know how to do spreadsheets and
Right.
Google forms and, And like just at our meeting on Monday night, somebody was talking about integrating the Google Calendar with other things, and like that's
Right.
beyond me. But other people can do that. Great, go for it, do it.
So the community building and that personal connections you feel in Manassas Park must be uplifting and encouraging.
Yeah.
And then you hear on the news and you look at the national level, and it's discouraging. Are you optimistic about? Are you hopeful about American democracy?
I'm really worried about it.
Yeah.
I'm really worried about it. I see people I know that are, really, well, that think we are definitely in a constitutional crisis, say we're having a coup, all these things. And certainly, I mean, it's been a barrage of things on a daily basis ever since the inauguration that make us think that, see
Right.
that. I mean, it certainly feels like it. There's getting so much pushback from the courts, but then, it's like some progress, but then something else happens.
Right.
We were actually, my partner and I were so upset about the election. We were in Nova Scotia during Election Day.
Oh.
Not during Election Day, during the inauguration.
Oh.
We just couldn't stand to be here.
Understood. And Nova Scotia's lovely, probably.
Oh, it is,
Any time of year.
and Canadians were sympathetic.
Oh yes. So, do you have hope? And if you do, what keeps you hopeful?
I am hopeful that more and more people are waking up to see what's happening.
Right.
And, my mother was a career civil servant, so I really appreciate the government and what the
Right.
government does for people.
Well, thank you for all you're doing to build a community and standing up for democracy in Manassas and Manassas Park.
And we do that. It's not always pretty.